example. So where our ultimate goal is to understand how MVC is implemented in any of the UFI applications, and how do we build any, add any controls, etc. as such. So simple logic is like when our username a user logs in, so we should be able to log in, and if it fails, so we should have, there's a, please verify username password combination is incorrect, etc. So it's incorrect. So when they sign up as such, we can say message as thanks for signing up. So this is a small application which we built, and how the behind the scenes happening, etc. We are trying to understand now. And in yesterday's class, we just discussed about uh, the MVC in model. We have OData model, JSON models, how what kind of XML models are there, and what kind of I18 models are there. So these are like different kinds of models we have. And the view also we write generally in either JavaScript or XML most popularly. And even JSON and HTML are also available for writing the view, but those are not the recommended approaches. So for the model, etc., we use JSON, but not for the building of this one. And we know the complex of HTML, plain HTML, so it doesn't have the full set of controls, etc. And only we cannot use all the UFI controls as such. So we don't generally go for JSON and HTML, but we use JavaScript and XML views for or writing of the views. And for the logic part, we always rely on JavaScript. So this is how the MVC, each layer, what kind of approaches, how we write, etc. We just try to see here, and I'm just summing up. So for the OData services, odata.org is the reference where we can check out for some of the queries. So what are the frequently used queries and how we use? In that, most important ones are dollar filter queries, and then we have something called dollar expand. So those are the two queries which predominantly we use in during UFI. And the syntax for writing in various views is this is how it looks. For JSON, this is how we can write. In JS, we can write this way, and the web components, etc. This is how the HTML kind of syntax would be used. So these are like various ways how each of this MVC can be used and can be written in UFI we just talked about. And like I said, there's one more concept called one-way or two-way binding. So from view model controller, what is this one-way and two-way binding? So just today we'll discuss more on that, and then we'll just see more. So one-way and two-way binding are now we have model. Now we have all the data residing on our database, and from the database, when we are requesting, our OData model allows us to hold the data for our application. So for application before binding to the view, so all our data would be residing in the OData model. From the so any queries in this case, yesterday we discussed that this is server side model. So when I say server side model, any queries which we request, suppose as part of CRUD operation, we are creating a form. So we have our form, this login application itself, we have it. So this login form, the moment we are clicking on login, what we are saying is we are sending this particular username and password, and then we are trying to say check whether this particular combination exists in the database or not. So we are sending a a piece of query like filtering the records in the database records based on username field. So based on username field, we are trying to filter. So this particular syntax, how generally it could be is, so we will be sending omodel.read read, and then we'll pass the suppose an entity called user set. Okay, user set with we can this way we can pass it. So dollar filter username eq. Okay, we can check for this way. So this is how our structure read query can be. So this query, whenever you're passing it, this hits and executes at the database layer. So that's the reason we call it a server-side model. So all the actions, etc., happen on our backend server where our actual database resides. So whenever we use OData model, all our queries will happen. So what are filter queries or what are any other commands which we instruct to do. So on the table, this will be performed. So similarly, see if in this case, if you see, this is a pretty simple example. But sometimes when you're filling your name, if you automatically you had to auto populate all complete fields, like you have some other fields, suppose like you have your date of birth, you have your city, etc. So when you wanted to auto populate certain fields, what you're essentially doing is we are just asking for username. You're entering username. So username, we are entering it, and we are trying to fetch. So in this case, I'll send username as Ram, and we are trying to fetch date of birth, etc. So this like from this direction, we are from one way, we are just instructing the to fetch certain details. And on other hand, we are automatically auto populating other the fields. That means whenever anybody see multiple people, etc., if anybody is modifying also, automatically from database to UI, if it gets updated, or from the UI to database if we update. So both cases, if simultaneously, if we are able to automatically retrieve and update the form, etc., then such scenarios we call it as two-way binding. So two-way binding, when we are saying not only programmatically but automatically, if say simultaneously two people are updating this particular form, whenever you check it, so automatically when from the database, if data got changed, automatically the application gets reflected. So inbuilt OData model except JSON models. JSON model by default they support two-way binding. That means whenever your model changes, automatically your UI as well changes. When I say model, so the model which we are holding the data. So we made a call, right? So we made a call, and the model got updated. So model has to be whoever if in the two different places we are using this particular model. If any one place, if you modify the model as well, the whole page wherever it is used also gets updated. Okay, so there's a difference here we need to understand. So this I'm just trying to mention as how this looks. So in this simple example, so this request where we make a request and we just get the output, then in this case is a simple request where from the UI we are requesting and we are getting an output. That is simple case of one-way binding. Okay, there is no data being passed from UI to the back, or from back to the UI as such. Okay, there is a simple scenario where we request a username, just check for the username with Ram whether it exists or not, then automatically request goes back, and then it comes and it provides the data. In the OData model we have the data saying that username Ram exists, then we are allowing to log in. So this is an example of one way, whereas a two-way case would be where this model, this OData model is being updated. Maybe there could be many ways of two-way being used. So there could be other case where you are having two table on the top, you have top on the top you have form and below you have a table, right? So if you fill it on the form, complete form details you have filled it. So in the model you already have the data, right? So based on this data, automatically we can fill up the tabular data as well. So these all scenarios two-way binding will be useful. So by default, OData and JSON models both support two-way binding. So two-way binding allows us to implement these kind of functionalities, etc. So that's how the advantage of model always, if it's updated, so we need not to come back to page one, page two, etc. Directly from the model we can bind to our pages. So suppose you're having multiple pages. If your model has updated data, so anywhere we can retrieve that particular model data and we can bind to our view or any control as such. So this is about one way and two way binding. Clear, or any questions on this part?
Yeah, it's clear.
Okay. Uh, so now let's see how we are adding this particular logic. In this case, it's a simple case, right? So we just created one simple application. Okay, so on the view, if you go to command palette and use application generator, then we get this particular application. I think, okay, might have to restart once. So we have to go to view and command palette, Then open application generator, we can select the freestyle application. So by selecting freestyle application, we got this particular new project. Okay, so once we have this project, so then we are trying to see how we are constructing this particular whole application. So let's go and check in controller page. So how we are have written all the logic. So now in our application, so we have seen in the view. So in the view we have, we could see some, username and password field and two buttons. So basically we have one label and one input field. And similarly we have one button. So these are the basic controls which we used. So for that purpose, what we have used is, so these are like for specifying to layouts, etc., VBox, etc. we have used. Now we have the label and username, and similarly input we have, and then we have email as well. Okay. So here these are like basic structure we used. So we just added label, it's mandatory field. If you wanted to set, we can set as required equal to true. And if we wanted to have input type to be specific, there is, we have property called email. If you specify email, it knows that when you're entering at the rate, etc., those default type checks also we can do if you know that it's a email type. So if you can better understand input, if you set to password, automatically whatever user enters, all will be masked with stars. So if you see, notice here, so all the text is masked. So type automatically understands that what kind of input field is. So all we did is we added one label, we added one input. Similarly, we added one more label, and we have set one input as email and other as input as password. So we have to ensure that any input fields, the value, if not initialized, it will be blank, and we have to have a unique ID for in order to grab this particular value in particular input field. So in order to fetch this value, we'll use this ID to fetch what a user enters or what are auto population we wanted to dynamically set to this particular control. And we have a simple buttons here where we added press event, and on the moment this login is the function in the controller which gets invoked. So now in this case, press equal to login, when we say the moment, it refers to the corresponding controller page of main controller in this case, and it checks for the function called login. So in login, how did we achieve this functionality? So first and foremost, the here var is a JavaScript keyword here. For any data type, we use var itself. So we had one variable called omail, and we are trying to store all the input value. So this dot get you is the common way. So the view, so this we call it as view. So view, either you can fetch all the view using the app ID or page ID. There are two ways of identifying the view. So one is using your pages or page ID, or you can use it using your which are the container you have it. Now in this case, we have VBox as our container. So within the VBox, we have this particular whole VBox. We have all these controls. So with using the VBox also, we can identify this particular controls. So we need to identify within the view page where our controls resides. So that is the key for binding. So in this case, we have our, I'm using page as a view. To whole page I'm trying to look into it. So what I do is this dot get you directly. When I say this dot get you, it refers to the whole view page. And by ID mail, we are trying to get the value of in the input field. So input field, we have a value, and that value is stored in this particular omail. Similar, the password field, whatever we entering it, that value is stored in oPassword. So if you want to have any control where you want to fetch the value, in this case, method is get value. There could be other properties. So yesterday we have seen about properties. Now we'll see about methods. So if you go to input control now, so this is sap.m control. So yesterday we understood how to use all the properties. So there are like lots of properties. So out of which, suppose if you want to set the max length for this particular field, so we can set the max length. Max length, if you say password should be only 10 minimum of 15 or etc., or maximum this much. So we can set minimum and max length. So using max length, we can set the upper limit. So we have all these properties which we are good to use. Now similarly, like password, etc., input type. Based on the type property, we have what all kinds of users we have. So in this case, these are deprecated, so you should not use it. So we have email, and we have number, we have password. For the telephone, we can use tel. So these are different types of properties which we can use. Now, how did we got that? In this case, we have a simple function. So we know for every property, if it is an input value, if it has the method default value to fetch the data is get value, etc. But how do we know for certain controls there are like more complex methods are there? So what are those methods, etc.? So if we go here, we have something called method section here. So on the extreme right. So these all are methods which we can use for init for input field. So add suggestion, attach, bind value, clone value, destroy suggestions, destroy column. So these are like, if you see, there are like lots of methods are there. Okay, it's not just the basic thing. So what are property we are saying it? Every property can be set using methods, or you can using view. So in the view, when we are writing the code, if you want to set in the view, we use properties. But from the controller logic, if we want to set a property, then we use methods. So in this case, the same value, if you see get value, if you see here, we have here get value as such, it will be alphabetically sorted. So if you see here, get value. So the get value property, how we have to use is like get, this we call it as camel case. So G, always two letters if you have get value. So first would be small, and then value will be capital. Likewise, any control, if it has get selected item, get will be small, selected S will be capital, and value again get select item I will be capital. So that's how all the methods names would be. Make sure our method names are they're case sensitive, so we have to be careful when we are using the method names. So the same get value, either from the control if you want to set, we use get value methods, whereas from the view, if you want to use the same one, we can directly use value. So if I set a value here as Ram, so by default, automatically whenever we have this application loaded, so it by default it can set the value as Ram itself. I think I reloaded it. So we are trying to see like any property. So in this case, what are property? If you certain properties we may not be using in the view, but directly using the methods, we can actually set, or suppose visible property. Now we wanted to hide and hide. So sign up button we do not want to show the moment we have it. So we can directly use the set visible to false or true based on the ID. So that's how we can use methods to control the dynamically the behavior on the view part. Right, if you see now, automatically the application when it loaded, it auto-loaded with value. The same one now from the control as well, we can do the same activity. So using set function, so get will be able to fetch as well. So in this case, the same from the view we have set the value. Now we'll try to set the value from here. So in this case, if I say set value from the controller, we are trying to set the value. So value we have set from the view, the same value now we are trying to set the value from controller. In this case also, it automatically auto-populates. If we reload this page, it automatically, when it loads, it automatically sets the value. So we have seen the flow of data from from the controller to the view, and from the view also we were able to set the value. So this is how the difference between properties and methods. So from the property section in the view we can directly use, whereas dynamically when we have to set a value, we take the help of methods, right? And alongside we have one more in the API called aggregations, associations, and events. So events are one more events allows us to know when to call JavaScript code. So in this case, input, there could be multiple ways. So we have submit, suggest, live change, etc. So when to use which all events? So events in a simple fashion, if I have to say, in this case we have for input, etc. If you see, there is no event, we haven't used any events. So how do I know? Like in case of button, there's a press is an event. So if you see this login, I have mentioned that this is a function. So functions we write it this way. So any function which we have written in the controller, to access it, we use events. So events helps us to link the UI with the JavaScript controller logic. So wherever we have written the logic, we are saying when I click on this, go and execute this particular piece of code. So we are saying to execute this particular piece of code. right? So these are events. So for input, what kind of events we can have? So input, we haven't used any events. If at all we have to use any event for this one, what all we can use? They says there is a submit event, so we can use submit. And if you want to do any validation, suppose email, if there is a no at the rate etc, so then we wanted to validate, so we can do that validation. So what we say is on on submit etc, I can write on submit or on mail select. So I can use a function called on email select. And if you see how I used, why I did not use press and why did I use submit. So if you check the events for the input property, we don't have any press event. We have submit event or live change event. So whenever we are submitting the record, then this particular event gets triggered. So they say when this gets, if you use this particular submit, when exactly the function will be called. So it will be called when we press a key on the input, enter key or anything if you press. So the moment I enter it, it doesn't execute. So I have to press enter, then this particular submit function code will be executed. So similarly, if I am entering this way and if I have changed anything, so live change is the event whenever anything changes in the input field, it automatically executes the code, underlying code where we have specified. Now you're able to understand, relate, why different events we have. Whenever we're entering a keystroke or whenever we're changing anything in the UI field, so accordingly we can use it. Suppose if user has some, whenever I just place my mouse cursor and I just place inside it. So automatically what to enter certain cases we do not know. We want some auto suggestions. Maybe it could be a country field where you wanted to have some auto suggestion. So which country to select. So in those cases we use suggest etc. Suggest, what it will do is it will open a value help and immediately we can auto populate certain values. Suppose you entered E etc. All the characters kind of countries which we have with starting with E can be shown as a suggestion. So this is how for the same input field we can have multiple events as such. So at the same time we might have to do validation, at the same time we might have to do suggestions as well. So in order to redirect them to different functions, we have different events, and based on the scenario we can use different events. So clear about methods and events and properties?
Yes.
Okay. So I think we now in this case we'll just see how we have used submit here in this case. So submit, we can, if you want, we can just use it. So in this case we have used the sign up. For the sign up we have used one event called on sign up press, and for the for the login button, the moment we press we are using login etc. So let's see how this flow. Now we got the value. Now we understood, we used methods, get value etc. No, we got the value. So I'm just, so whatever value we have it, we are fetching the value and we have it, and within the password also we have the value. Now I'm doing a simple check. Now if it is completely empty, so in this case empty, if they log in, still it should prompt as user hasn't entered, so please verify username password is incorrect. So we have to do whether it is empty also. If it's empty, if you're trying to log in, we should not allow. So to avoid it, what we are doing is we are doing a basic check that if OML is not equal to blank, so we have different properties here. So we have like basic checks. So in this case, not equal to refers to OML. If it is blank, how do we identify is using this particular simple syntax. So OML, this is not equal to. So we have a clear difference between this particular syntax I have explained in earlier. So if we use this way, it just it's an assignment operator. If you use single equal to, it is assignment operator. If you use double equal to, it is like comparison operator. So whatever value is there in variable A equal to, if we say where A equal to 1, and then we say where B equal to 1, and here if we want to compare A and B, so if we say a condition like if A is equal to B, if we give A equal to B, there are like three differences here. If A double equal to B, if A triple equal to B. So all three are valid syntaxes. And what is the difference between each of the syntax? So if A equal to B, what we are trying to do is value in B, we are trying to assign into A. So in this case, what it does is, it doesn't have any condition. So it just has a value. It is equal to this. This is how it looks. If A equal to B, if you say nothing but if one. So this is how at the runtime it understands that the value over here is this is how it appears. So in this case, if you check it out, it says as true. It says as true. It becomes a boolean. Why it becomes a boolean is A equal to, this is like comparison operator. It's comparing what's the value in A and what is the value in B. So this is a comparison operator, whereas this is an assignment operator. Assignment means value in B is automatically assigned to A. If you say A equal to B, if you say A double equal to B, A and B values are compared whether they are equal or not. So in this case it is equal, so it will say as true. And if you put as triple equal to B, now in this case, if instead of B, if I say this way, so that means this is a string, this is not a number, whereas this is a number. So in this case, it says as false. So even if we want to do the type check, so type of data, because var can be used for all types of database, all types of properties. So in this case, A triple equal to B, if you say, it is nothing but it will do the type check as well. So now in this case, we are trying to see if both are empty. So this is an equal to operator. In our case, if you want to do any comparisons, instead of using double equal to, always prefer to use triple equal to. Do not use double equal to, but use triple equal to if you want to do strict comparisons. Strict comparisons, you wanted to check the data type as well. So in this case, this will turn as false. If it has to be true, then B value should be 1. So then this will show as true. Clear? So now in our case, we wanted to ensure that both are empty. If it is empty, then it should, if it is empty or not, we are checking. So OMail not equal to blank. That means it is not empty. And similarly, this exclamation mark reference are not equal to, and whether OMail and password are equal even in the type check. So type check, when I say even the, it should be, in our case, I added a simple logic where if we enter whatever you're entering in username field, the same thing should be entered in the password. So simple password logic kind of way we have taken. So both values should be equal even in the data type wise. So I cannot enter, if I enter this as a string. So in this case, if I enter as a string, so if I enter here as just a 3-letter word, so in this case it will fail to understand. So of course technically this is wrong, but what I'm trying to say is if the data type wise, if suppose we have one as such and we try to do, so it tries to check the whole data type as such. So numbers or whatever, both should be the, when data type wise also it should be same, then only that validation will be working. So in this case, it should not be empty and both values should be same. Then you throw a message called message box that you are logged in. And if this condition fails, so if this condition, so in this case, it says it should say true. So if it is false, then automatically it will go to error block for all the cases. Any other case, we are saying to say, please verify and username password is incorrect. Here, one more thing we talked about, loading of libraries in the controller. So in this case, we use something called message box. So how did we use this particular message box? So we are trying to load the library on top of our library here, sap.m.messagebox, and the same message box, we are giving a name that order of precedence. Here order how we can control is our first one. So the function, in the function space, we have to specify in the same order. If you try to do it the other way around, the library loading will be affected at the runtime. So runtime identifies, okay, this corresponding library, where anywhere we are using it, it is it has been, we gave a name called mbox. So whenever you say mbox, it represents message box. So similarly, whenever you use message toast, it represents this particular library. So the order of sequence matters. And if you see similarly for sign up, what logic we have written is, so similarly for the sign up, what we said, we used a message toast saying thanks for signing up. So always if anybody has logged in, you can redirect to any page, etc., and we can give. So difference between message box and message toast is this disappears automatically. This one we have to close it explicitly using some OK cancel button, etc. So clear or the whole how methods are used, etc., and how we are using. So in this application we have seen a basic functionality of So login scenario we have checked, and the moment we do sign up, so automatically you see that disappears. Whereas for the login screen, we have to, in order to close this dialog, we have to click on the OK button. So this is how message box, etc. So different cases we use. If you understand how did we have the UI centered in the center, etc. For that we use something called CSS, etc. So CSS in our case, it's not our own CSS, it's SAP standard classes. It's always we have to use standard classes as CSS, and we use the standard classes. Now if you come back to UI, now logic part is over. Now in the UI, how did we achieve this all is, we used different layouts here. So VBox are the layouts which we have used. If you see this whole page, I have used within the page, this under the content, I have used something called VBox. So if you see whole page, I have placed in one vertical box. Okay. So controls, using the controls and placing, it is tricky. So for initially when you are not able to optimize the space, so how much ever space you are having it, if you want to use effectively, we have to use this horizontal and vertical boxes. So how do we use it? And always there's a thumb rule this way. Sorry. So any questions so far, or because logic wise, how do we write? We have seen.
I have
And
a
how do we
question.
use this? Yes,
The
yes.
title, like let's say if there's a title thing that we have MVC concepts, right? How can I tried to do this yesterday and I wasn't able to make any progress. So how can we move this to the center?
You wanted to this particular one to the center, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So see, one way to do this is we have the property called, what is the property here? We are using title property. If you go back here, so we have set to the page, right? Page, there is a title property which we are setting it. Here there are like two ways of achieving it. One, using our CSS class. Okay, either you can use your CSS class, or you can use the whether page has any properties. So default, if page has a property of any other properties, first we have to check. Okay, so if we do not have, we know how to use CSS class as well. Okay, so we use something called margin class. So let's see there. If let me add both approaches. Now if I add a class here, so our UI sap.ui dot, if you see UI dot margin classes, we have to use in this case margin classes. Any space on the left, I said, right? We have to use margin classes. If you wanted to add on the left side, on the right side, on the top, or on the bottom, whenever we wanted to add a space, we have to use margin classes. Okay. So in this case, margin classes with SAP UI margin begin. If I say SAP UI margin begin, so it will apply on all the sides. If I just wanted to have a large margin, SAP UI large margin begin. If I say this, generally it has to give me some space, but it may not actually give me the full space. If you see, it affected a whole title. This space it has taken. I think this we should not. It is actually moving the whole header. If you see the difference now, you'll notice it. Now this got removed. So it is actually pushing from the left to the right. So this won't work for us. Okay. So this is a max CSS can do in our case of margin classes. Now notice the difference. So what I'm trying to do is, so this property now after placing it, it just moved an inch from the left to right. Okay. So in our case, this margin classes using which max we can achieve is this much. So this will not help. So we have to either take the help of custom CSS. So custom CSS again, in this case, where in the CSS folder, we can directly add one new class, our own class. So in this case, what class we can do is, see, I have center class as well. So what is this is, it's, we have seen the positioning it relative to the page. So top 20%, from left 40%, etc. We can use this, or we can use anything. So generally how we write is, see, for the calculator example, or even this example. So here also we have used this particular center element for this particular VBox. If you remember, so this is how this got centered, is using this particular CSS class only. Here, of course, border, etc. I have added. For us, we don't need a border. So what I'll do is I'll create a new class. So dot, if you're representing it is a class. Now title center, I'll say title. So any syntax you can take. So I'll do a class here this way. And all we can do is we have to use position and where we have to place it. That's it. So position is relative. I said relative in the sense this whole page, this x-axis, y-axis, if you consider, this will be 0, 0. And as we move along, this is our this is from the top and from the left. So top and left are like from the left, if you say where you want to position, if you want to position exactly, if you take this whole as 100%, this whole as 100%, so 50% from the left and 50% not from 50% from the top, it should be 0. Okay, from the left we have to set it as 50%, and from the top it should be 0, correct? If you notice it, where did we position this particular control? From 20% down we have placed it, and from the left we placed it at 40%. Now in this case, what I'm saying, from the top, because this is 0, 0 axis, it has to be exactly at the here. Okay, so from the top, this is for the browser, if you see in the full screen mode, so this is 0, 0 for us. From the top it is 0, and from the left it is 50%. So technically from the top 0%, this should work. So how do we use this CSS class? We can copy this CSS class and we can append to this existing one, or we can, if we do not want to use this, we can directly ignore also. So multiple CSS classes will be using space, we can give it this way. Okay, now let's see if it works or not. Let me take some difference. Okay. No, still not affecting. I think it could be any standard CSS class which might be overwriting it. Let's check for the page. So this technically, this should this is how the syntax we write. So in this case, the page, if it has, because page it's part of shell, etc. Any standard CSS class, because all the properties will have standard CSS classes. So if any CSS class precedence is there, we understood that in CSS, if multiple CSS are there, precedence takes over it. So if any SAP standard CSS class is already overriding the behavior, then whatever CSS we are applying may not be reflecting on our page, because after post this, there could be standard CSS class which might be overriding it. So one potential way to check is we have to go to page control. So so with the now currently what we are using is page. So in page, one way is, like I said, we have to check the directly in the property section. If you have any property which matches for alignment of title to center or middle, etc., then we have to check. So it says enable scrolling, content only busy, floating footer icon, nav button text. Okay, this is deprecated. We have nav button type, show footer, show header. Yeah, whether you want to show header or hide, etc., for that we have an option. And whether we want to have a subheader, etc., we have. For the title, we have something called title alignment. So title alignment, if you read around, it says set to title alignment to auto. Auto means if you are running on a mobile device, where it has to position, because it's not always accordingly. So auto means where the mobile device there is space is a little bit less, it automatically adapts. So if it says title will be aligned to the set the theme, if not set, the default value is center. So what they are saying is this is the standard CSS class I'm talking about. So standard CSS class already exists, so it is overriding whatever CSS we have had. That's one biggest problem why if we use custom CSS is we cannot predict. So CSS we should not use. Reason behind is we have lots of CSS classes which SAP uses, and all those CSS, if we want to modify, we have to use theme designer tool only. Okay, in this case we have a CSS already which is default is center, other policies will set start or center, etc. So we can use title element property and we can pass the value as center. So you can use this particular syntax. Okay. So in the view directly for the title along with it's a property, so we should not put in the class whatever we put are custom code. This is like standard code. So this is a difference. Now make sure you have the same case, etc. And by default, if you see, this is a by default property. Default property is auto. That means based on the page, this is automatically, I think, as per the CSS, it comes with the left. Okay, maybe in the mobile it might be center. So that's how they are mentioning it. Okay.
Oh yeah, I didn't do the class equal to. Maybe that's why I came up here. I was able to find the title alignment, but I just did not know how to declare that inside that.
Oh,
Um,
okay,
like
okay,
I see that it's a class, but how do I
okay,
use it?
okay. So see, this is custom code for the CSS. This is standard code. So what we are saying, this is standard CSS class. This is
Hmm.
custom CSS class. Both are correct. There is no wrong about it. But why, precedence always takes, if you're writing any custom code, for even control also custom code when we are writing it, always precedence will be going to the standard classes. Okay. So this is one of the reason why we should always check whether we have standard classes or standard approaches. If that is not possible, then only we have to use CSS. CSS always it's a no. We should not use custom CSS at all, because behavior will be order of execution. So I can have one more same CSS class. I can define one more, and I might itself be using in different cases. Okay, I might be tweaking this particular. See, if you use a star, like I said, if I use star, that means it will affect all the controls. So wherever we use this particular class property, if I say star as title, center, etc., that means it will affect wherever I'm using it. Everywhere it will affect the CSS. So problem is we cannot control the behavior in mobile devices, tablet, etc. Custom CSS class. Now you might have designed this keeping in view of your desktop, but this will not change dynamically. This top 1%, 50% will be applicable even for mobile, even for tablet, right? So you cannot handle responsive behavior using your own CSS. Okay, we have to standard CSS class. What the difference they give is they have 3 to 4 CSS classes. For mobile equivalent title center, we have one more CSS, and it automatically identifies and it applies that. Okay, you're getting right. So custom CSS challenges as such. So if you see now, it came to the center, and we have it everything. So straight away, whenever we are doing it, how do we have to ensure is that uh, we should be careful when we are using each of the properties. So always API reference is a go-to place where we learn. Even sometimes if you see, this is introduced only in 1.72. Before that, if you have to use, what is the approach? You have to use custom CSS.
Yeah, because I went and I tried to search for the title, and then I got like title and title alignment,
Okay.
under that M library, right?
Mhm.
So when I click on that, what I see and what I see on the screen are different. I am seeing enum sap and dot m dot title alignment. Here on your screen, I'm able to see like it's class. So then at least that sort of clues you into how to declare that, right? How to use that uh, property over in our main view, right?
Okay.
Um,
So
so
uh, you are not able to see the same kind of properties there.
no, I'm seeing a different like I can take a screenshot and put it into the.
You can
Uh,
probably share once. So let me understand, because either one could be version. So version what we are see, I'm showing 1.87 version. So maybe the look of it might be changing, but generally the properties will be same across. Maybe see if 1.72 title element is there. If it doesn't exist, then the custom CSS which we discussed, that approach we have to follow. If there is a standard class, we have to use standard class. And the version where what are you seeing? Probably you can share me once. So let me understand.
mm, yeah, I'm trying to do quick. Just a second.
Okay.
Where did my screen go? My screen froze. Just a second, please.
Okay. Yeah, take your time.
Oh, uh, oh, okay. I'll put the screenshot in our chat box here.
Sure, sure,
So
sure, sure.
that would help. That is what I'm saying.
Okay. See, yeah, This is also correct. See, what you have, your title alignment, what this is, see, okay, I understood. So what you asked is correct. Okay, let me show you what's the difference of it. Okay, so if you see, these are like sub properties. Okay, so API document is this, the way they structured it. You have selected, okay, I haven't shared. Let me share my screen. So if you see here, you are able to see screen, right? Let me know once you can see. Okay.
Yes.
So in your case, in the title element, you have clicked on this entity. So what all other properties we can use? Now instead of center, you can use start, you can use none, you can use auto. So see what all values we can use. It's trying to show us the values here.
Mm.
So if you just do, in your case, you directly selected, directly you searched for title alignment. So instead you search for the page, not for title alignment. Okay, so always you have to read from the parent class. In our see why what I mean by parent class is
Got it. Yeah.
the control. So pages
Yeah.
are control. So if you are trying to apply the title, etc., title, where does it reside? It resides in the page. So we always have to API reference. We have to look at the parent class. So page is our parent class, and title element is our subclass. Okay, though it is a property, it inbuilt again, it has some other methods. It could have some methods. Okay, okay. So that's how. So here you have searched for title element. So instead you can check for page. Then within page, probably you understood now. So we can just drill down further. So in case if you see button type, so for button type we have selected and we have used input type. You see password email. So similar way we have what all values we can set to that property. So one advantage with ID is, so in ID itself, there is one more advantage. If you do control space, so here I don't know value. I need not go to API reference. I can do control space, and automatically it will suggest us some values. Okay, so in this case, whenever you have to autofill certain properties, automatically those values will be populated. Okay, if you have to understand some what values it can have. So I mean, you should have some fair understanding of what kind of properties uh, alignment has. Alignment, we know that it could be either see start, begin, etc. In case of password, etc., it could be password. We should know at least some API. If you are frequently using it, we'll know what kind of values it supports. Like input supports email, etc. And in this case, because we have to have familiarity, samples we have to play around with a few controls to get this kind of flexibility. So what kind of, it's because every time going here and looking into the type and doing it for each property, it delays your development, obviously, because you should know, right? For because these are frequently used controls. If you're using button, you are using table control. These are like frequently used controls. There, your properties, etc., everything you have to dig deep dive. So in this case, if I have to use a table control, I have to explore the API part of all the controls. Then only I'll have full flexibility of using all the functionalities of table. Now we have the table here. Okay. So even I'll go in deep later about tables. Tables are the most important control in UEFI because we have 3 to 4 tables. When to use which table also it's very important. And this is particular to UI table. This is not M table. And if you see, you have properties here, lots of properties. So there is a difference between column header, alternate rows, color, etc. There are certain values. These all are disabled. If you see certain will be disabled because there is only by default water value is only that you can use it, and there will not be any other options. Either true or false if you are setting it. In this case, there is no see. Yeah, here you see here selection behavior for the table. We can have single select option or multi select option. Okay, so in this case, if you have to use it, the behavior of the application will change completely. Even the sub methods also will change. So if you are using specific row behavior, the type of methods also will be different. So I'll show you I mean visualistically example, then you can relate it. So these are the 4 tables what I was talking about. These are the, so grid table, a response table, tree table. Okay, we have one more called analytical table as well. So that is also part of grid table. But generally we have 4 different types of tables. Grid, response is nothing but M table, tree table, and then we have something called analytical table. Okay, so analytical table gives a flexibility of switching between table data to chart and chart to table data, etc. So those kind of switching, etc. We have some more flexibilities, etc. Okay. So in the response table, if what I was trying to mention is now we have this is sorry, I was talking about grid table. So grid UI table is nothing but grid table. If you see the this is a UI table when it says the control library underlying library, that means it is grid table. If it says M table, that means the underlying control is mobile control. This can be used for mobiles, etc. Whereas grid table can be used only for desktops. You cannot use it. Okay. So this is an important parameter we consider whether this particular application will be consumed in mobile devices. Then we should not use grid table at all. We should use only M table. And if we are using only on the desktop, then this gives Excel kind of capabilities. So fully Excel for kind of functionality if you want to have, then UI table is the one go to you have to use. So customer, if he wants very full flexibility on the table, like full flexibility like Excel, how he's typing, etc., and how he's sorting, filtering, etc. So those kind of functionalities, etc., are available only in the UI table. And the number of columns, if you have like 20, 30 columns, then UI table supports those many columns. Whereas M table, because in a mobile we have to render that same table, so it has a limitations like max 8 columns, 6 columns less than are preferred. When you have less than 6 columns or 8 columns, then M table can be used, but not if the number of columns are way high. It's not that it won't work or something, it will work, but the performance wise on the mobile devices will be affected. Very much you can use M table. And how do we know? So how am I saying this? These all are part of design guidelines where we have discussed, right? So design guidelines is a place which will tell you when not to use M table, when not to use grid table. So we have seen SAP UX guidelines, right? UX guidelines. So there you can just identify the difference between more. What I was saying is just few differences, but there are like many more differences. Right. Now, what I was trying to pinpoint here is if selection behavior is row, certain properties. Now, in this case, the control, if you see, it is multi-select is enabled. Okay, this is not this property. Sorry. So we have one more property called selection mode, not selection behavior, selection mode. So if you have selection mode, if you have set to by default is multi-toggle. Okay, so multi-toggle in this case nothing but it's multi-select. So if you say by default it will come with UI table will come with multi-select option. What if you want to do single select? So if you do single select, you have to set the mode as as a single. So we have different modes. So if you see single, if you set, it becomes at a time user can select one row at a time. So why am I saying this is pretty much normal, right? No, the difference here is the corresponding events also you have to use accordingly. So the events part will be changing. So when you set to mode as a single select, number of rows when we are reading or updating the records, single select means one record we have to fetch, whereas multi select means we have to fetch multiple records. So you have to fetch all the records and you have to process all the records. So the logic, the methods which we use will change based on the property you are setting it. So if you're setting the selection mode as multi, by default the properties or methods which we are using can be undergoing some change. Okay, I'll explain in detail in some other application, but we cannot use all the events. Certain events are meant for multi-select, certain events are meant for single select. So if you instead of suppose if you want to fetch what all rows are selected, you say get selected items, whereas if you have a single you say get selected item. Okay, so the method names will change. So there are like dual method names. If you see here, I'll just show you get selected. So there's a one called selected index. Okay, so which are the index you selected, which row? So suppose you fourth row, how do we know? So 0 1 2 3, so this is the third row. So using get selected index we can identify what's the which row is it. So if you want to modify only this particular row, then we can modify using get selected index. So get selected index of selected row, when we say, it will fetch us the row index. That means the row is third, and whatever value we want to access, we can access this way. So we say this way. So we say this dot get view in this case. dot get selected index. Okay. So selected index, when I say I'll get the index, and selected index I can store it in somewhere. Like in this case, I can say where O selected index. And I say what are the which are row I'm selected, so that index I'm storing it. Now using this index, I can modify the value. Now what I can do, I can say set value. I can say set value. Suppose you can say product name. So product name using index I can know. So product name dot set value. Okay. So where I have to set which product name I have to say. So product name of who selected index I will say. That means we have lots of product names. But which product name we want to modify? We want to modify the product name which is in the 4th row. So we say this particular row. So selected index is 4. So in this case 3 or 4, whatever it is. So we'll set. What if we have multiple values? So set value will say in this case as notebook, etc. So if we have to change for all, we'll use a for loop saying right for I equals 0. Okay. I less than total index of index length. We say how many are selected. So we can say index length, or we can say one more property called selected rows. So how many rows are selected? In this case, we are saying one index. If we have to get all the items, get selected items. If I say get selected items, it will tell me how many items are selected. Where O items. In this case, it says get selected items. It says 4 items are selected. Whereas this one will say which index is selected. You're able to understand the methods and the difference. So these all methods are, in the table we have to familiarize a lot. So I'll give close example with tables, etc. But to give a fair idea, so in this case I'll say O items, and then I'll say so it will increment and each and every from starting from 0 for first row, it will start changing it, and it will go until the items, the selected items is last item. So last item it's 3 in this case. How many are selected for all this from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 linearly based on this. Now in this case, when the index shows as 0, then this particular index is, it says as product name of 0, and it will set the value. Next again it will go to next row item, and then again it will check the index, and then it will set. So this is how the behavior of your property can affect how we use, etc. So if it is not multi-select, we need not to use this for loop, etc. And we need not to loop around all the values, right? You're understanding, right? So the behavior of the controls, even the selected events, certain events we cannot use as well. So which method to use? In this case, if it is single item always, if multi-select, in this case, my selection mode in the UI control, if selection mode is single, okay, then instead of selected items, I should not use. I should use get selected item. If you use items, it is meant for multiple. So it will throw a syntax error. So this is an invalid method, etc. in your console. Okay. If I use items when the mode is a single select, but the same when the mode is multi-select. So make sure that whatever modes, etc. you're using it, you have to understand the default behavior. If you're changing it, according to the methods also, you have to ensure that likewise similar methods you're using. So in this case, if a mode is multi, so multi-select or multi-toggle, the different names they use it according to the control. In M table say multi-select, in UI table say multi-toggle. Okay, those names also we have to make sure that we are using the right words. If you use the wrong word, again it will end up with invalid method, saying that there is no such mode as such. Okay, so am I clear with I mean, what will the cascading effect of your methods based on your selection of the properties? So properties, what are you selecting it, ensure that it has its effect on its methods. So you need to understand this particular point. So that's the whole idea of explaining this particular part. Clear, or any questions on this? Are we good? Or anything you couldn't relate it? So if you couldn't relate also, it's no issues, because as we progress, we'll better understand using API. And when we get good grip on API, then it will be flexible. See the concept what we are learning, we can apply to all controls. We have 850 controls. And if you are able to master to one or two controls, so that's why I say take simple example. For button, if you could explore, like for the button control, all the properties, if you could explore, like explore everything and put a simple button on your UI control and add all the properties to it. Like what I suggest is just put this simple button, and in this case we have button. So this, for this button, try to add all the properties, what are properties are there, play around with it. So see how the behavior is changing for each property. Add one property. So now I add one property, I check the it automatically refresh, right? So you'll be able to see the property how it looks. So apply all the properties and play around with it and use all the methods. Try to set it from the controller. Then you will have complete understanding of what API gives the flexibility and how the controller is changing according to each of the methods. See, these are primary methods. We have something called borrowed methods. So I'll show you borrowed methods. Am I going out of topic, or you're not able to relate? Just tell me, so that accordingly I'll pause and we'll talk this at length at a later point of time. Are we good? No? Yes?
Yeah.
No?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Fine. See, why I'm going in detail this length is we have lots of methods. See, there's like lots of see, if you understand the beauty of it, we have written one simple logic. Likewise, this login method is one logic, right? So these methods are also some custom functions only written in JavaScript. So in the parent class, you'll find when you say get method, that method is written. These all methods are written somewhere. Like similarly, how we have login method, we have written, it is written somewhere in the parent class. So if you know how to use it, you need not to write the logic all by yourself. You can directly consume that inbuilt behavior. Now, if you want to get an index of the row, you can use plain JavaScript as well. But if you have a method, it's easy to use. Directly, you'll get the index. If not, you have to write an array. You have to store all the items in an array. You have to count the length of array. Then you will get the index. What I'm trying to highlight here point is, if you know the methods, you need not write all the JavaScript logic all by yourself. So try to identify relevant methods. If you see in a previous example, we have seen a scenario where CSS class, CSS pretty much you can do using custom CSS. Nobody is saying that you should not. I mean, it's not possible. It is possible. But when you have a simple control where you can use directly center, why do you have to write all this logic, and why do you have to figure out whether I have to put a position control or absolute or relative or from the top or left, etc. You're able to understand the benefit of API.
Yeah.
So it's all gives us more flexibility. So the more the methods we try to know how to use it, then we have more room for flexibility and easily we can build applications.